So, ladies and gentlemen, this past year I decided to play Time and Eternity. Before I get into the game proper, I want to explain how the first part of that subtitle adds up, because Time and Eternity's marketing is the most blatant misdirection I have ever seen. This is the game's official website. See how everything is, you know, pastels and pinks, lots of gold, very stereotypically girly, if you want to call it that. But looking at this, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the game was aimed at women and girls. Let me assure you, nothing could be farther from the truth. Case in point, this is the very first line uttered in the game. And with no idea of what you're about to agree to, we're given this choice. Which I'm pretty sure is just two ways of saying yes. This is starting to look really familiar, guys. I'm getting oh God. Hello again, Archanelico. Fancy meeting you here. It's gonna be one of those games, is it, Japan? Well, back to Time and Eternity. It turns out that we're talking about that girl, Toki, marrying our protagonist, who I'm just going to call Toolbox for reasons that are going to be very evident later. Our conversation is interrupted by Reijo, Toki's filthy rich friend, who is here to make sure that no prenuptial shenanigans are going on between the two engaged couple here. We also meet Weddy, the wedding planner, a klutz wearing, well, look at that. I think those balloons are structural, they're holding up the dress, or she's some kind of clown prostitute. I don't know which is worse. And finally, Enda, a low-rent Hatsune Miku clone who sounds exactly as annoying as you're probably imagining right now. These girls are so one-dimensional, there is no more that needs to be said about them. Let's move on. So, it's the day before Toolbox and Princess Toki get married. All of her annoying friends have come over. But all is not well, because a few months ago, Toki heard from a psychic that someone was going to die at their wedding. But that's silly, I'm sure everything's going to go off without a hitch. We're soon given our first quest right afterwards. Talk to everyone around the table? Don't condescend to me, game. This is going to establish a pattern. The whole thing is dragged on for like 15 minutes in which you discuss such important things like what you're going to call each other once you're married. Riveting. At long last, we get to the day of the wedding. And to the utter surprise of everyone in attendance, ninjas attack. Wait up, go back. What happened to all of the guards? There were more guards than there were ninjas. How did this happen? Anyway, Hiro takes a sword to the gut, fighting off one of the ninjas to protect Toki, which would make him kind of awesome, actually, except that he probably wasted with this line. I'm 100% awesome right now, a total chick magnet. Drink it in, boys and girls, it's not getting any better from here. So as Toolbox lays dying, Toki suddenly changes her hair color to blonde and goes all Uma Thurman on a bunch of ninjas, spin-kicking half of them to death. And this new girl and Toki apparently share one body and have the ability to go through time. So I guess we're going back in time. About 10 minutes ought to be enough to notify all the guards outside, right? No, Toki's got a better plan. Quantum leap, 6 months into the past. We're going to talk to that psychic lady about the attack, because apparently that makes more sense. Unfortunately, Makimona, the psychic, isn't actually psychic. She just claims it was all a wild guess to make the reading more entertaining. And we take her word for it when, I don't know, you could have used your royal authority to have her tossed in the dungeon and beaten with a rubber hose until she tells you the truth. To make matters worse, Toolbox has been transported back into the body of Toki's pet dragon, Drake. The game has set itself up as a romance and then cut its own legs off by turning one of its protagonists into a goddamn Pokemon who cannot speak. We are also introduced to the battle system, which differs a little bit from most JRPGs, modern ones anyway, in having only one principal character. And by showing Toki's underpants with every single attack. But it's not as bad as some games I can mention. You know what? Time and Eternity, there needs to be a detour here. I want to talk about the gameplay, not the story for a moment. Why is it such a god-awful mess? I want to dwell on that combat because other than running around samey, boring field maps, it is all that you do. First off, you can either attack up close with a knife or at long range with a gun. Most of the enemies are melee focused. Why would you ever bother running in close to them? You're just slamming the attack button and blasting away. You're aided in battle by Drake, who does so little damage that he may as well not bother attacking. However, he can heal you at random for so much health that for the first half of the game, healing items are worthless. And when combat truly breaks down is in the balance of magic. Your most basic spells can one-shot enemies from the word go, doing thousands of points of damage, whereas your physical attacks can do maybe a few hundred. The discrepancy only gets worse as the game progresses, so that by the end of it, even a non-elemental spell I got at level 7 is enough to take out the strongest enemies in 2 to 3 hits, tops. If an item you're equipping doesn't boost your M attack stat, it is barely worth the effort to equip it. And the moment I realized this, 95% of the game's battles cease to be a challenge. That isn't to say that the game is without its challenging moments, of course, but that's because they're all incredibly cheap. The game either throws enemies at you that can't be effectively dodged, so they hit you dozens of times in a row, or they throw teleporting vampires at you that require absolute perfect timing to hit with your spells, all the while shouting at you over and over again. You know what? Let's take a look at that particular enemy in action.
If you want to do it,
You're dead!
Notice how the camera keeps kind of shaking in and out? That made me physically ill after a while. Alright, that's enough of that. Later in the game, you gain spells that allow you to counter these terribly designed enemies by literally stopping time, removing the only challenge that the game had left, cheap though it may have been. But there is one thing the designers put in that cannot be countered with cheap time magic, and that is elemental resistance. This bird I encountered early in the game is resistant to lightning. You have no way of knowing this before you run into it. At the time, both of my weapons were lightning enchanted, which meant that they could do no damage at all. Even better, my only spell at the time was Bolt, a lightning spell. You might say, this is an edge case. Someone wouldn't normally equip all of their spells and weapons to be lightning enchanted, but the fact that merely adding the element to your weapon makes it useless is incredibly bad design. It took forever for this low-level pissant of an enemy to kill me, all because I didn't possess the psychic foresight to tell me that I was screwing myself. So I hope I've established that the combat system is utter garbage, and since most of the game is combat, it becomes an unbearable slog. Let's refocus on the story for a moment. After traveling back in time, you make it home and explain the situation to your friends, who say that the Assassin's Guild is probably behind it. Now remember, Toki's the princess of this kingdom. She has divine right, royal authority. She could call in an army to scour the land for assassins. But instead, she and Enda go do some hunting for the assassins themselves, approaching their investigation with the subtlety of a half-brick in a sock. And we run into two assassins named Lucy and Linus. We beat them, leveling up in the process. And when we level up, Toki switches places with her violent, deadpan alter ego, Toa. This happens every time you level up, so you're constantly swapping between these two girls. Like the cast I mentioned earlier, both Toki and Toa are incredibly uninteresting, so no more need be said about them. We face the assassin's boss, Ricardo. The only direction that his voice actor was given seemed to be fake, bad Spanish accent, and that does not do him justice, which you'll see in a moment. It turns out Ricardo and these chucklemongers aren't even actual assassins. They're members of the Assassin's Guild fan club, a real thing that actually exists. So now we know what the time in Time and Eternity stands for, hours being wasted. Eventually, we track the assassins down to several islands nearby, and every single assassin we find claims that there's absolutely no plan to attack the wedding. They're assassins, they're lying. But we go back home to discuss this with our friends, because I'm sure they're totally qualified to match wits with a bunch of deadly murderers. This becomes a running theme throughout the game. Go on quest, learn nothing, come home, go on quest, etc., etc. Anyway, what revelation do these jerkwads have that could help you? They tell you to talk to Ricardo, who continues to hit on Toki and Toa as he has been doing since the moment they met. His come-ons do not end. You encounter him half a dozen times in the span of less than an hour, and every single time he hits on Toa in incredibly stupid ways. At least we get treated to this.
Stay away from my woman!
You bite with the fury of El Diablo!
I love seeing him in pain.
Cannot dissuade me. For I have have fallen in love. So please, mi amor, let us come together and make many adorable little niños.
Remember what I said about bad fake Spanish accent? After way more steps than it should have taken to beat the information out of him, we finally get the location of the Assassin's Guild HQ. And along the way, we find a magic berry that allows any living being to speak. This is important because, as I said, Toolbox is stuck in Drake's body and can't talk. The berry quickly resolves that problem. But it's time for another quick diversion while I break down why letting the protagonist regain his speech was a terrible idea. As the player's avatar, Toolbox is incredibly generic, but the writers did give him a single defining personality trait, lechery. This is a guy who will hit on his fiance's friends while she's in the room. There's a side quest that this guy takes more interest in than anything else, and that is a massive 4-part struggle across time to clear steam out of the bathroom so he can see his fiancée naked in the shower. I'll let this little clip here demonstrate both his creepiness and the game's lackluster animation quality.
I just realized something. There's actually 2 girls that want me. I'm just marrying the one, but realistically, there's 2 of them in the mix. The more I think about it, the more I see what a sweet deal I'm getting here. No, not just sweet, totally delicious.
I'm sure it is. Shut up, you. And then there are the CG scenes that you unlock throughout the game. Christ on a cracker, these are a nightmare. Remember how the game tried to sell itself as some sort of romance? Well, this kills that pretension right and quick, like a bullet to the brain. And the really upsetting thing here is that despite Toki and Toa almost never being cool with these scenes, she tries to gut him like a carp a moment later, by the way. Their love for him measurably increases every single time you find one. Toki and Toa are too dim to see that they're being taken advantage of by this guy. The maid outfit there, by the way, comes from Toolbox's travels to the far-off land, I'm not making this up, called Japan. Does the fact that they're engaged make any of this less disturbing? Maybe, I guess, but it's all the more bizarre when he's creeping on the girl he's about to marry. You know what? It doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it better. Back to the story. Wrong. Okay, no, it's not back to the story. It's time to go home and tell everyone how excited we are that Drake can talk. The game keeps dragging you home for every little thing. Sitting around this table became my own little circle of hell. But we finally make it to the assassin's base. Ricardo has actually beaten us there and is trying to convince the assassin's leader not to attack the wedding. He even brought a cake to try and smooth things over. Unfortunately, between the accusations of planning the attack and the awfulness of Ricardo's cake, it pisses off the assassin so much that he jumps down and decides to attack us and the wedding anyway. We have just created a time paradox. We tried to stop the attack only to find out that we were the root cause of it. Great game. Now you're not only wasting my time, you are making me responsible for all this bullshit in the first place. But as one might expect, we beat the boss and are free and clear. Time to wrap up some tag quests, pop back to the day of the wedding, and put all this behind us. And there is no way they could ever pull this same stunt 2 more times. None whatsoever.
Oh no.
So they pull this same stunt 2 more times, and a bunch of monsters attack the wedding. And rich bitch Rejo here pretty much prison shanks the princess. So we time leap again to get to the bottom of all this. Now we're stuck in some creepy forest 3 months before the wedding. And we soon see Rejo conspiring with the forest psychic Makimona. Time to get to the real story. Makimona says that she'll tell us what's up with Rejo, but only if we do a bunch of stupid side quests for her. Makimona herself says it is a huge pain in the ass, and I could not agree more. Why can't we just use our royal authority to have her arrested? But no, time for a whole bunch of side quests. Each one of those icons represents one lazy jagoff who should not even warrant the princess's scorn. But here we are, it's time for another tangent, side quest edition. The side quests in this game are easily the most asinine busy work that I have ever had to stomach. You come to perform such dire tasks as bringing a reporter the pen and paper he forgot when he was going on assignment. Or tracking down this lady's boss. She is worried that he is too fat and is going to get eaten by a monster. Because he's so fat. This is the guy, by the way. Like a walrus of a man. Look at him. Totally fine and out of danger, by the way. And the worst ones come from this annoying kid in town. A prime example here is when he asks you to buy him boxers to impress a girl with how adult he is. There is something intensely wrong about having to buy underpants for a random second grader. And to make matters worse, you need to buy the underpants from some dude in the sketchiest back alley in town. Since this takes up so much time, the list for your side quests gets absolutely monstrous as you go through the game. Look at how far down the scroll bar is, and this isn't even all the way through the game. That's only the list of secondary side quests. Almost every one of them starts off with someone asking you to do something stupid, and Drake responding, "No, that's stupid. Why would we do that?" Good question, but it doesn't matter, because side quests are crucial to your improvement. Side quests are the only way to efficiently gain points to buy new skills, spells, abilities, etc. You can get anywhere from 10 to 100 points for completing quests, but only 2 to 4 for completing battles. So unless you really want to grind the game's crap combat system, you'd better get ready to run some errands. So after all of that side questing, finally, Makimona's ready to tell us where Reijo's gone. She's off to some nearby island to talk to an evil dragon. I smell a boss fight coming. We find Reijo talking to the dragon, Nether Drake. Apparently, he's forcing her to murder the princess, or he will take away that which she cherishes the most. Oh, and he can mind control her whenever he wants, so saying no is basically not an option. Time to lay down some justice on this guy. Beat him up, right? No. As soon as we show up, a little box pops up saying that we have to go straight back home and talk about this. Why are you so adamant about not letting me play, game? Do you know that you're garbage? The only thing that we find out from going home is that Reijo had tried to nullify the deal with Nether Drake by doing secret favors for Makimona, but because we saw her doing them when we time jumped, that option is off the table. Once again, we are responsible for screwing ourselves. It is an Ouroboros of failure. So we go back to Makimona, hoping that she can shed some light on this whole thing, but she won't let us help. She won't help us unless we, all together now, do even more side quests. All of this eventually leads to a sequence that I think pretty much sums up the game's approach to play and humor beautifully. Just take a listen.
Reijo, I'm the one who started all this with Nether Drake.
Yeah, you are.
You shouldn't put yourselves in danger for some girl like me. You're not just some girl, Reijo. I'm just some girl who's just some girl. I'm just some girl who's just some girl. Okay, enough.
Get on with it! Between her and Makimona, we find out that Reijo was born poor. After her mother died, she made a wish with Nether Drake to become fabulously wealthy so she could be friends with Princess Toki. Stupid, but the kind of logic a distraught 8-year-old might come up with, so Reijo turns out to be the most sympathetic character in the game. Makimona, overcome by sadness from the story she already knew, tries to help Reijo talk to her dead mother by acting as a spirit medium. However, Makimona isn't actually a medium or a psychic, so why are you wasting everyone's time? Still, there is one way that you can help Reijo talk to Mommy Dearest. I would ask you to guess, but the answer is so stupid I am afraid you're all too smart to come up with it. It is by feeding her one of Ricardo's horrible, horrible cakes. Because they are so disgusting that they give you a near-death experience, allowing you to interact with ghosts. I am not making a word of this up. That's the cake you give her. That is a live nude sitting on it right next to the mushrooms. This goes about as well as you would expect. And Reijo finally does manage to have a touching conversation with her dead mother's spirit, and ends the serious part of the game right there. Time to go and beat Nether Drake, right? Wrong, back home it is. And your decision is just to go and fight him anyway. So we finally confront Nether Drake, but instead of putting the boots to him, we try to negotiate. Turns out that this whole deal was bogus, because Reijo's most cherished thing wasn't her life, wasn't her wealth, nothing like that. It was her wish that Toki and Toa would have a happy marriage. Isn't that sweet? And Nether Drake didn't even have a grand design or anything. He wasn't trying to advance some grand evil scheme. He just did it to be a dick. What to do, I guess. And at this point, Reijo threatens to report his unfair business dealings to the Better Business Bureau. It never is mentioned again, but I had to bring that up because of how balls out ridiculous it is. When we finally get to fight him, they introduce an entirely new combat system that plays like the world's most awkward third-person shooter and has nothing to do with any of the skills, stats, or mechanics you have been using up until this point. We're suddenly here lobbing spells at a giant dragon because between the weakness of the spells and the boatload of HP he has, you cannot end this fight. It takes forever, but eventually we do win. Rachel's free of her obligations, we can go back to the wedding, get this over with at long last. But even now, Toolbox and Toki are starting to think that things might not be so fine and dandy. And their fears are justified when Makimona, of all people, shows up and attacks us with a bunch of magical relics. So we jump back to just 1 month before the wedding, and Toki and Toa's magic hourglass starts talking to her. I'm sorry, did that come out of nowhere? That's exactly how it happens in the game. And Toa's response to it getting uppity is this: we're not doing this because we enjoy it. Rarely has a game made a statement that summed up my play of it so succinctly. And as if predicted by that last sentence, we spend the next 10 minutes sitting around listening to people talk about the time loop the wedding keeps getting attacked in, over, and like so many JRPGs, nothing is said once that can't be said at least 4 or 5 times. By the end of the conversation, I was desperately trying to set every single member of the cast on fire with my mind. And in all fairness, it does raise an interesting question. Why can't we just go back to right before the wedding and stop all of this? Well, Toa explains that if they did that, there'd be no proof that Makimona was evil. What did I just say? You are the princess of this country. If you claim some random psychic fraud is guilty of treason, then you can have her tossed in a deep dark hole for as long as it takes for the danger to pass. But after extricating ourselves from that excruciating conversation, you go to Toki and Toa's grandmother, who taught them about time magic. Why are we only learning about her now? Seems important. Grandma tells her that the only way to break out of the Mobius loop is to acquire a set of magical artifacts known as the Something Four. And if any of you have been within spitting distance of a wedding, you know what that means. Unfortunately, the Something Four are guarded by Makimona. And since the items are supposed to grant eternal happiness to anyone, she wants you to give them to her. But we managed to convince her at long last, and now it's time to get 4 magical MacGuffins from a bunch of weird spirits. The first is Olden, an alien-looking dude who talks like a perverted old-timey prospector and guards something old. And once he has you answer a bunch of questions, the only way to convince him to give it to you is to answer in the sketchiest way possible. Unfortunately, well, no, fortunately, I guess, for Toolbox here, that's no challenge at all. But once we've finally answered all of his stupid questions, he's ready to give us something old by literally crapping it out in front of us. I wish this only happened once. It happens 3 out of the 4 times. I will spare you the audio and video. Throughout the whole process, Makimona keeps insisting that we should give her the Something For when we're done. She wants him to improve her love life because she has never had a boyfriend, even after, I'm quoting the game here, 382 separate attempts. Despite her pleas, we managed to collect all of the items, so what on earth could possibly happen next besides Makimona up and stealing them from us, forcing us into a boss fight? A boss fight with a brand new instant kill attack that you have no way to dodge or defend against.
My time is now. Now, Makimona has arrived.
Yeah, I'm going to select a spell here. All right, this is, oh jeez. Okay, I'm good. No, not good, not good. Oh jeez. Jesus! 1 shot. That's all it took before I could even get off a spell. I want to make note of the titanic amount of HP that Makimona has. It is wildly above everything else that you encounter in the game. But once you finally manage to beat her with use of time magic, she agrees to give back the Something For. But when she does, Toa drops them, losing them over the side of a floating sky island. Now remember, I have the power to reverse, stop, or slow down time. I just used it to beat Makimona a minute ago. Why can't we go back 30 seconds and fix this? You are a freaking chronomancer. But no, we try to get married one last godforsaken time. Even the priest is getting sick of this, and as far as he knows, it's only happened once. And this time we are attacked by Toki's hourglass. Okay, sure, why not? But rather, the being inside the hourglass, Mobius, the physical manifestation of the Mobius loop that has put us through all of this crap and the lamest joke of a character design I have ever seen. I'm gonna enjoy punching you in the face. Mobius apparently wants to steal all of Toki and Toa's memories so it can gain full control over time, allowing it to laze around all day, watch TV, and do all kinds of other things that shouldn't be possible in a pseudo-European medieval setting. And when we finally have to face it, we have to go back in time to fight all the bosses in reverse order, from Makimona, to Nether Drake, to that stupid out-of-place robot assassin, and finally Mobius, who's turned himself into a big dude, and we come to the final boss battle. But first, it's time for more side quests. You can walk away from every single one of those fights to complete all of these side quests. And not just any side quests, they are the origin point of every string of faffing about and busy work you had to do. All of the side quests you did before start from these events. The game is just making you responsible for everything that you have ever had to do, and that is not the stupidest thing I'm about to tell you. After all of that, we go back to fight Mobius, but it stops taking damage after a while. Why? Well, the reason is because the Mobius loop keeps interfering every time Toki and Toa are about to get married to the toolbox. They can't actually marry him because Toki and Toa made a promise to look out for each other when they were 5. And because the promise itself was worded like a wedding vow, time itself declared they were already married to each other. And if they break their vow, one of the two of them will disappear forever. So rather than letting the woman here decide who's going to be in control of her own destiny, they leave it to you, the man, to choose who she stays with. This guy, the one that no one with half a brain would let into their house, their heart, or their pants. And despite the options having you believe this, you can only pick one of them. So we make our decision, shoots Mobius right in its stupid face with all of its stupid HP, and when the game comes to a close, we're shot back to the moment that the princess and Toolbox first met, only this time it's Toa that's the one who remains. All of her memories of their adventures together have been scourged from her mind. And what does Toolbox immediately do? He asks her to marry him. A guy you have never met, dressed like some kind of Chippendale knight, asks you to spend the rest of your life with him. Girls, what would you say to that?
No.
If you're Toa, you say yes. Look at the sincerity on her face. She has no freaking clue what she's agreeing to. But at long last, the loop is broken, vows are exchanged, and Toa carries her new husband out of the church, and even comes up with a name for their first baby, Toki, which is creepy on a number of levels, real and metaphysical. And with that ends my experience with Time and Eternity, an endless trudge through a game with no redeeming qualities that taunts you with a special ending in which you can marry both girls. Sounds romantic, isn't it? This is all you get. That picture right there is the only difference. So now you have no reason to play this god-awful waste of time. Thank you, everyone, and good night. And remember, burn on sight.